me that it's evolution.
Welcome to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Hedlund, a nature-led gardener, and we're taping the show a few days before the 2024 election, and there are just so many emotions swirling in the atmosphere. And on today's show, I want to address the emotions of the election, the polarization, the effects on our physical and mental well-being, and to suggest remedies. And the easiest way I know to ground this conversation is music. We're going to be joined by Lee Hawkins. He's a journalist, and he's an author of an upcoming book, I Am Nobody's Slave, How Uncovering My Family's History Set Me Free. He is also the singer and the songwriter of the song Heal. So Heal, H-E-A-L, How We Heal Ourselves. We're also going to have Shay Hansen. She's an AM 950 listener and author, and she created 2 music videos for the election. But joining me now is a philosophy professor and contributor to the soon-to-be-released The Bad Bunny Enigma, Culture, Resistance, and Uncertainty. Welcome to Food Freedom Radio.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for being here. So share us a little bit about your personal background.
Yeah, so I grew up in New Jersey. I taught high school for 8 years in Jersey, mostly philosophy, some theology, then got into publishing and journalism, leading to this contribution I made to this upcoming volume about Bad Bunny's, his persona, his music, which is something that's been a passion, a fascination of mine for quite some time.
So tell us about this book that's going to be released in about 2 weeks, right?
In about 2 weeks, yes. So it's going to be published by an imprint of Rowman and Littlefield called Lexington Books, and it features scholarship by thinkers from across disciplinary and ideological spectrums. You have people commenting on the implications of Bad Bunny's work on gender relations, on politics in Puerto Rico, on race. My contribution has to do with religion and spirituality. So it's really a very comprehensive and unique volume because we've never seen anything about any real scholarship about Bad Bunny before. So it's something exciting.
Now, so many people consider Bad Bunny the world's biggest pop star. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, he was the most listened to artist on Spotify for 3 years in a row. So he's pretty big. Absolutely.
He's pretty big. And then he's made news this last week. So tell us a little bit about the news story that broke this last week.
Well, I mean, he has been very vocal about politics in Puerto Rico for some time, very publicly calling out corruption that he sees within the kind of dominating, within the parties that are dominating Puerto Rican politics, but then also made a statement about the joke that was made at a Trump rally here in New York on Sunday, that had very, very blatant racist tropes. So yeah, I mean, he's been vocal about his concern for his people, the place that he's come from, and has really caused a stir with it. Yeah.
And I know this might put me in a camp of not being very cool, but before this, I really hadn't heard of Bad Bunny. And then when the story broke about him endorsing Kamala Harris and the beautiful video he put out, it was so emotional. It was a really emotional moment. And so talk about your segment is on Bad Bunny's spirituality. So say what you say in that in this book. What comments do you have?
Well, he's always used this phrase, la nueva religión, the new religion, but never really explained what he means by that. Some just thought it was kind of a marketing ploy. But when you look a little bit more closely, you start to see that he's engaging with certain spiritual, philosophical tropes that I think just get overlooked, partially because, we are living in a mainly secularized culture. We don't really tend to look at the arts, to look at reality through this kind of spiritual lens as much as we may have in the past, but also because his music is very raunchy, it is very explicit. People just say, that's against religion, that has nothing to do with religion. And I'm trying to argue that the kind of cosmic worldview that he presents in his music is very much religious. Now, whether you want to say it's against certain monotheistic, certain traditional religious values, that's one thing. But to just dismiss wholesale the spiritual depth of the music would be to really misunderstand what he's saying.
So, does music often express core truths? Does music have that power?
I mean, I think all art forms speak to certain spiritual, metaphysical realities, but especially in music, because, I mean, they say that when you sing, you pray twice. On the flip side, they say that, Lucifer was the lead singer in the angelic choir. So there's something extremely transcendent about music, whether it's for spiritual good or spiritual darkness. So any form of music, again, like by its nature, has deep an effect on our spiritual lives, I would say.
And humans are story-based animals, and it seems like there's been a long history of a few people trying to dominate and control the story. So one story that was told 400 or 500 years ago is that the Earth is the center of the universe. Now, most people agree that that's not true, but that's almost like a closed story, and yet music can kind of emerge from the cracks, which I think you even have a podcast with that phrase on it. So do you want to riff on that a little bit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. My whole kind of project, Cracks in Postmodernity, is that even though I think modern thought, modern society, and then subsequently postmodern thought and society have kind of covered over certain essential truths, essential experiences that are part of human nature. But if there is something true about being human that is universal, that transcends time and space and cultures, then something's always going to crack through these ideologies. Something's always going to remind us that, no, there are these core truths, core realities that make us who we are and have the potential to unite us, to give us hope in the midst of turmoil, in the midst of suffering.
And that finding that unity, and so looking at Bad Bunny, some people use the phrase optimisticalism. Do you agree with that? And what does that even mean?
Yeah, so optimistic nihilism is kind of riffing on the philosophy of the existentialists, like Albert Camus, saying that, if God is dead, like Nietzsche said, if there's no objective truth, then we have to embrace the nothingness of our existence, the meaninglessness of existence, and kind of make our own truth, make our own purpose in life, which, I think is kind of a naive project, because to just say, well, there is no God, there is no truth, there is no meaning, how do you know that? But also the optimism, I think, falls short, because it's like, if I'm just going to live my own life, do my own thing, like, I'm not enough to satisfy myself. So I think there are certain songs of his that fall into this kind of trap, saying, I'm just going to do me, I'm going to sleep around and party and go crazy because that's what's going to make me happy. But the saving grace of Bad Bunny's music is that he's not afraid to admit that mentality falls short most of the time. He's not afraid to say, like, actually, I feel really empty. I feel depressed. And I want there to be meaning. I want there to be a God. I don't know if there is, but I think this is really refreshing, especially for young people who do get caught in this individualistic, nihilistic mindset that, yeah, maybe that's not all there is. And maybe that, that human instinct is cracking through and saying, well, maybe there's more, and I should start searching for the real answers.
And you said something in there, I'm not enough to satisfy me. So that we're not no man's an island, that type of philosophy. And is there something in Bad Bunny's music that shows vulnerability?
There's a lot of it. Especially in the heartbreak songs, he realizes that, the people that he falls in love with, sometimes they don't love him back. Sometimes they break his heart. So he's not afraid to say, I have this need to be loved. And again, even in the songs where he says, well, screw this person that broke my heart, I'm just going to go party and go wild. Even at the end of that, he's willing to say, this didn't satisfy me. So I am not enough for myself. Even the other is not like the solution to my sadness, my loneliness. But I would say, I hope that he comes to a point where he sees that it's not so much that the other person is like the fix for my emptiness, but they're a companion who joins me on this search for that which is really satisfying. That's which is going to save me, if you want to put it in those terms.
Right. So your freedom and my freedom are connected.
Yeah. If we choose to treat each other in that way, to look at each other in that way. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So the endorsement of Kamala Harris, do you think that will make any difference?
I mean, to put it bluntly, no. I mean, I see a lot of these Puerto Rican artists doing these endorsements. You know, you had Nicky Jam first endorsing Trump yesterday. He retracted that. You had a few others. I have to say, I think a lot of it's just very symbolic. I think a lot of it is really much detached from real grassroots efforts, especially that are happening in Puerto Rico, because there are a lot of grassroots initiatives that have the capacity to take into account the real needs of everyday people on the island. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a noble impulse behind the endorsement, but again, I think they really need to start with the people. Look at what do the people need? What are the people trying to do for their local communities? So yeah, I want to write them off completely, but I am skeptical for sure.
Okay, I know. I have this real optimistic, like, it's going to make it, and I was actually hoping for that because I do think that that in some ways trying to respond energetically to all of the turmoil and the division and the dramas and how to kind of walk with the pain that's living in our culture. And so, I mean, when I was looking at this, I saw this one phrase that the opposite of depression is not joy, it's expression. So it's finding that expression and that core coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, and this is why I'm kind of partial to these kinds of local grassroots initiatives, because they're a real chance for encounter. They're a chance to really look at our neighbor, look at the people who we're with every day, and to share our needs with them, to collaborate with them. So again, it's not to totally dismiss larger political projects, but I think because we're so caught up with what's happening on the national level, everybody knows what Trump just tweeted, what Harris said at the debate, but do we know what the local politician said at town hall? I mean, most of us has no idea. So I think it's important to look at.
And I do think, I mean, my hope is that we can move to a place where we have a stronger democracy. There's a lot of evidence about the wisdom of the crowds. I mean, we all do better when we all do better, and we all get better policies when we have all voices heard, when everyone has a seat at the table. And those tables can be messy, but when there is a hidden harmony and love, then I think we're able to move forward and in a way, with our hands with our arms together, moving forward. And so my hope is that we emerge from this time with a sense of affinity for fellow Americans, but also a sense of affinity with humans around the globe and a sense of affinity with the natural world. And so do you think Bad Bunny's music speaks to that at all?
Yeah, again, I think it can be an introduction to rediscovering those things that make us most human, which have the capacity to unite us. Again, like you have to have a certain level of maturity when listening to his music, because it could also be a tool for distraction from those essential truths. But again, I think all music that like authentically tries to convey human experience has the potential to open our eyes to these parts of who we are as people. Absolutely.
Cool. So is there anything else you'd like to say, or?
All I would say is that Bad Bunny's music, as we see, I mean, is commercially very successful, and because of that, is very much enshrouded by this hype. And I think when we only look at musicians for the hype, not just Bad Bunny, look at Taylor Swift, look at Beyonce, etc., we don't always pay attention, like, what does this say to my soul? How is this challenging me to look at life differently? So I'd say when we listen to popular music, don't get caught up in the hype. Don't get too caught up in like the kind of corporate dimension of it, but ask on a deeper level, like, what does this have to say to me as a human being?
So what does Bad Bunny's music say to you as a human being?
It says to me that I need to really pay attention to my fragility as a person, that I don't have all the answers, that things are not always simple and clean cut, and that there's a drama, there's a messiness that we really need to give space to and stop pretending it's not there.
Stop pretending it's not there, and be brave enough to face what is there.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. Again, the shout out for your the upcoming book and where people can check that out, and we're gonna go out with some Bad Bunny music. So But
Yeah. So the Bad Bunny Enigma, put out by Roman and Littlefield. You can get it on their website. You can get it on Amazon. Most Barnes and Noble, most outlets will have it. But yeah, absolutely, check out the volume. It's going to be really fascinating.
cool. And so, do you think Bad Bunny represents a new religion?
In a way, yes.
In a
Maybe
way.
not. I don't know if there's going to be an actual church to Bad Bunny, but no, it's definitely a way of seeing reality, a way of seeing the cosmos.
A way of seeing reality in the cosmos. So you've been listening to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Hedlund. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
Terminaste sin rap otra vez, pidiendo que te tocara. Ya será difícil.
Welcome back to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Hedlund, a nature-led gardener, and we're taping this show a few days before the 2024 election. There are so many emotions swirling in the atmosphere. And on today's show, I want to talk about the emotions of the election, the polarization, the effect on our mental and physical well-being, and on our entire democracy. And also to suggest remedies. And one of the easiest ways to ground a complicated conversation like this is music. And I'm very pleased to be joined right now by a singer-songwriter, Lee Hawkins. He's also a journalist, an award-winning journalist, and an author of a book forthcoming, I Am Nobody's Slave, How Uncovering My Family's History Set Me Free. So welcome to Food Freedom Radio, Lee.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you, too. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your background.
I grew up in Minnesota in Maplewood. I'm the host of a podcast that ran called What Happened in Alabama, and that's all about Maplewood because my father was born in Jim Crow, Alabama, and I was very curious because that situation was so much different than how I grew up in Maplewood. I've been a journalist most of my career, 19 years at the Wall Street Journal. So in addition to being a Wall Street Journal alum, I have this book, I Am Nobody's Slave, coming out, and I write about the intergenerational effects of slavery and Jim Crow and the integration generation on the Black community, but more particularly my family. I trace my family history back 400 years. So I deal a lot with childhood trauma, and which, obviously a lot of my ancestors and elders went through that growing up under slavery and apartheid. So I study that. And my goal always is to provide healing and dialogue and to encourage more people to come together through critical thinking.
And the music that we started with had the heartbeat and then the child crying. That's your song. So you want to talk a little bit about your song? We'll be playing more of that song at the end.
Yeah, that song is called Heal. That song is really a song that I wrote about domestic violence. A lot of my work deals with the role that violence has played in the founding of our country and then how it morphed into, the family setting, and the community setting. Right now, we have this whole debate about gun control and everything, and we have to understand how deeply entrenched our country is in violence and steeped in violence. We were founded on violence. And so this song is about violence and particularly violence towards women, which is overlooked, violence against children, which is really overlooked because we have 17 states in this country where corporal punishment is still legal, where you can hit a child 3 times with a paddle. I've seen some states that are hitting kids, or some schools that are hitting kids one child 50 times in one school year. In Mississippi, for instance, Black girls are paddled 6 times the rate higher than white girls. And the 17 states who do it are the slavery states mainly. And so once again, tied into this country and normalized. And so this song is about the normalization of violence and letting women know that that we hear them and that we want to push the community and the country to raise awareness on that issue.
So there's a sentence in your song, the pain you conceal is the pain I feel. And I think that that's kind of true collectively, that there's so much pain swirling in our society, and we see it in the election. And the other thing that kind of popped up this last week, and I hadn't heard this quote before, but I find it just has so much meaning, that the opposite of depression is not joy, it's expression. Does that make sense to you?
I think so. I was just in a meeting yesterday with a childhood trauma expert, and she was talking about finding your gift and your ability to speak. Expression is a big part of people dealing with things that have happened to them early in life or traumas that happen to them as adults. If you find your purpose in life, you tend to be not only more happy with yourself, but more inclined to support the dreams and aspirations of other people, more empathetic. And I think that what's great about the show that you're doing is that that's what we're missing in this election today. Not a lot of empathy. Everybody's self-interested. And so when you don't have that when you're not complete, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to be tolerant of the differing opinions and objectives and dreams of other people.
Right, and there is so much emotion, and so one of the things that you put out on one of the social medias this week is why I reached out to you, and you were writing. You said, "Oh, my friend said because Bad Bunny endorsed Kamala Harris, we're going to win," and I wanted to hear that. So, and the previous the person I had early on did not agree with that. But do you think that these endorsements from people like Kamala, people like Taylor Swift, J-Lo, Bad Bunny, do you think they move the needle when it comes to our politics? And if so, why?
I do think they can move the needle. I think in the particular case of Bad Bunny, that video that I made was kind of challenging my friend, pushing back on him, saying that Ricky Martin and Bad Bunny and all these people coming out would help, because I talk about internalized racism, in which racism can be internalized by the people who are actually on the other end of it. And in this case, the Latino community, and there have been many cases in which I've been told directly by Puerto Ricans and Cubans, I'm not black, even if they have African blood, but they identify as white. And I'm not saying that's everyone. I'm just saying that one of the things I discuss in my book is called the bondage belief system. And it's about colonization and how much of a profound effect that colonization can have on the public, and how people who are targets of racism can start to take on the attitudes of the oppressor, which means that it doesn't necessarily mean that a person is going to hear something racist that was said like Tony Hinchcliffe said, and then decide not to vote anyway based on the perceived racism that they felt, because many of the stereotypes could actually be embraced by those people. I mean, I think that what we're seeing, what we need to look for in the post-election analysis is, how did Latinos vote, particularly in how many were concerned about undocumented immigration as one of their primary concerns. I'm not saying that that will be the case, but I think that one of the problems this election that we've seen both with the Democrats and the Republicans is their inability to see voting blocks in a very complex, nuanced way, to understand that these groups are not all monoliths, and there isn't a lot of compassion in the way that people think there is. People are self-interested, and the primary concern is green. It's not black, it's not Latino, it's not Asian, it's green, it's inflation, so we're going to see more of that. And I think it's important for our politicians to see people of color as complex.
Well, and when we were talking beforehand, I had an experience once where I was commenting on, I believe in privacy, and I'm concerned about all the technology around privacy. And this person came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm a libertarian too." And I had a horrible emotional reaction to that. So I really want to respect that, and this idea of moving into complex nuance. And I think and this is a food show, but it's also a word, this food freedom. And I think When we talk about our internalized trauma and our internalized narratives and stories, part of claiming our right, our birthright, is to wake up to our freedom. And so a real specific example that I've worked and chit-chatted about before is I was raised with, math and science is kind of crazy. I'm a woman. I don't, Barbie said math is hard. And it's like, why am I thinking that? Where is that? And to really unwind some of those imposed layers so that my genuine self can rise. Is that kind of what you're talking about with the bondage?
Yeah, I think, when you accept what's projected on you, the various stereotypes, and I'm very sorry to hear that happened to you as a little girl, because that's a very common thing. We see girls starting to disassociate with math and science, even though they're outperforming boys. It's improving a bit, but yeah, I mean, it's very dangerous and it's very pervasive. And so we have to allow people to be their authentic selves and to push our loved ones to not take on those limitations. So yeah, I think you're right. And that is a big problem. And I think this year, however, politically, there's going to be a party that pays the price for that. And it very much could be the Democrats in this case, because they've enjoyed 90% of the black vote previously. And I think, when you saw Kamala Harris come out about 2 weeks ago and make a last minute appeal to black men, the question was, well, why didn't you do that before? What she was doing was conceding that she misread black men, and that she thought that there were things in her platform that would be all encompassing, and that she, could just bank on the support of that community. And I think that was just not really understanding. And then Barack Obama made it worse by coming out and telling black men, the reason you're not voting for this woman is primarily because you're sexist. And that wasn't fair, but once again, it was easier to take that position than it was to understand that black men transcend the stereotypes that are often projected on them. And so I think we are entering this one of the beautiful things about America is that we're entering this era in which our demographics are so much more diverse now. And we're starting to get a step closer to, that envisioning that more perfect union, if we actually decide to execute on the freedom, justice, and liberty for all aspect of it. And we are getting to the point where if you stereotype people, you can't succeed in this society on the level that you could if you don't understand and appreciate the diversity of our country.
Yeah, and I think, it'd be nice to have elections be about issues, right? Let's talk about healthcare and Social Security and cutting the healthcare. And how and I think that's my aspiration. I think that's our shared aspiration, is how to be able to look at each other with a sense of affinity and a sense of belonging to something, so that we can harvest the wisdom of the crowds, and that we can create policies that do reflect the popular will. But one of the things, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this show, is because I think there's almost a fight for the dominant narrative. And so how do we, in a very truthful way, because this is the hard thing, right? I can say the narrative is this, you can say the narrative is that, but it has to be based in presence and truth. And there's a lot of messy stuff in that. And that's why I love music, and that's why I still am hopeful that that the music endorsements, that music speaks to the soul, and that these performers are taking the risk. They're not just commercial people, but they are speaking their truth. And I am optimistic. I'm hopeful that Kamala Harris will be president of the United States and Tim Walz would be the vice president. I think that's the best direction for our country. So, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of valid criticism about that we need to be nuanced about it, right? Is that what you're saying? That we need to go into the dark?
Yeah, we do. And I can't endorse the candidate because I'm an objective journalist, or at least I strive to be. But I will say that and this is a food show, so I wanted to make this reference. I was in Alabama about 2 weeks ago with some executives, and we went to Selma, and we did a whole freedom um, sort of field trip where we were able to see all of the great accomplishments of the civil rights legends. And one of the treats that we had was that we were able to be in the kitchen with a prominent chef, and he was going to teach us how to make biscuits. And I remember because walking in there thinking, well, how hard could this be? You just add the flour and blah, blah, blah. And when this guy started working, Laura, I mean, I realized this is chemistry. I mean, this person is both an artist and a scientist. And if you don't get it just right, you mess up the recipe. And I didn't have respect, anywhere near the level of respect for that undertaking that I needed to have, because I came into that ignorant, and I came in kind of with the black and white thinking idea instead of looking at this as what it was, an artful process that needs to be taken seriously, and that you actually need to take the time to learn and to study before weighing in and before thinking, well, I can just step into this guy's kitchen and do the masterpiece, create the masterpiece delicious biscuits that he ended up creating. And I think that that's the problem in our society today. People think they know what they don't know, and they often weigh in on issues. I had a grandmother who used to tell me, don't you open your mouth unless you know what you're talking about. And that is so true on so many different issues today. People need to listen. People need to continue to study history and continue to read books, even though we're done with high school and college. That doesn't mean we stop learning. I don't know, there could be 20 different books on Thomas Jefferson coming out every year. Mm-hmm. We should be trying to read, all the time as history evolves. And if we can't do that, then we can't really be responsible citizens in this democracy. We all have a civic responsibility to be informed, to listen, and to be engaged in dialogue, and to not engage in black and white thinking and thinking about only our self-interests and not being willing to compromise. That's not what a democracy is. And so having respect for the art of everything, the art of politics, the art of food, the art of music, and understanding what goes into the crafting of some of these policies. If we look at the Constitutional Convention, I mean, they knew that they weren't going to get it done without slavery in the mix, right? And that was a very devastating part of American history. But that was a grueling debate. And I think that they, at that time, expected, and Lincoln also later talked about, that this nation, wondering if this nation would ever recover from the brutality of the Civil War and the curse of the original sin. And I think he was a prophet in the sense that he was able to see in the future and to understand that America would never be free if we weren't able to find out a way to come together and to do exactly what you're talking about, Laura. And we're still fighting that same battle that we were fighting in the 1860s. So I think there's been a lot of improvement, but a lot at the heart of change, at the heart of progress, is going to always be being more open to the other side, and maybe adding another side. I mean, we might see another political party break out, and that's another show, I know, but I'm just telling you that the dialogue is critical to this.
We're going to have to go again. We're going to have to go shortly, but I also think that there's something with the hidden harmony of love. And we didn't talk at all about spirituality and music, and I'm going to leave on your song. Is there anything you want to say on this topic? I know you had other thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, spirituality is for me, is at the center of all of this. No matter what you believe, if you do have a spiritual force and a desire to always be on a higher frequency, you're going to be in a better position to receive from others and to be blessed by their knowledge wisdom, but to also share yours and to continue to question each other. That's the beautiful thing about this country and our democracy. And I know it sounds cliche, but, it's a blessing. And you know how I know it's a blessing? Do you remember Brittany Griner? She was the basketball player who went over to Russia and got picked up for marijuana. She was in jail for a long time. She came back. And when she was on the sidelines playing and the national anthem kicked in, she broke down in tears like a sobbing baby. And I would love to interview her about what was going through her head at that time. But I think sometimes we forget and we take our country for granted. And dialogue is critical.
Dialogue is critical.
Freedom
And,
is critical.
and forging and finding that common, unifying philosophical and spiritual reality that can see us, that can allow us to see the affinity in each other, both as Americans and globally, and also beyond with all beings. And
Amen.
Amen to that. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much. We're going to leave with your song, Lee Hawkins, and your book will be out in
January 14th. It's on Amazon now if you want to buy it. Be ready. It is something. It's a firestorm of information. So be ready.
Okay, Lee Hawkins, and you're listening to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Hedlund. We'll be right back.
Thank you. God bless.
You too.
Your resentment is still suffering like a heartbroken little girl.
Rise, America, rise. The call has come, rise up as one to heed it. Rise, America, rise. A new day dawn, let us move on to greet it.
The agents of deception will soon be swept away. You have the power to seize this hour and build a better day.
Rise, America, rise.
Welcome back to Food Freedom Radio. I'm Laura Hedlund, a nature-led gardening, and we're taping the show a few days before the 2024 election, and there's just so many emotions swirling in the atmosphere. And on today's show, I'm talking about freedom. And actually, I think the easiest way to be talking about some of these emotions is through music. So I appreciate Lee Hawkins, singer-songwriter of the song Heal, which we heard. He's also a journalist, formerly with the Wall Street Journal, and an author of the book I Am Nobody's Slave, How Uncovering My Family's History Set Me Free. We also had philosophy professor Stephen Adubato. He's a contributor to the soon-to-be-released The Bad Bunny Enigma, Cost and Certainty. And now the person who's singing that song, Shay Hansen, is joining us for this episode of Food Freedom Radio. Welcome, Shay.
Well, thank you. Well, happy to be here.
Yeah, so you wrote and you created two music videos. Tell us about that.
I did. And those were my first. It was quite an adventure. Hold On was the first, and then Rise, America, Rise, which I wrote really because to try to dispel some of the despair that I sense around so many people, just feeling like they don't know what's happening and I don't know how to respond to it. And I feel like that is what will defeat us because it paralyzes us. So I wrote these songs to kind of, reassure people that we're banding together and it's gonna come out all right.
Well,
the songs are.
Yeah, I heard. I mean, there's a huge amount of uncertainty in the air right now, and even I caught it in taping the show because I was pretty sure my other guests were going to say, "Oh yeah, the endorsement for Bad Bunny, it's all good." That's the endorsements of Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Bad Bunny, J-Lo. All of those music represents the core from our soul, and these are the people who become popular. They're truck driver kids, and they tap into their music and they become popular and massively they're endorsing Kamala Harris. But they all three said, well, I don't know if it's going to make any difference. So do you think that's going to make any difference? I was hoping it would.
I think, yeah. Music is, they say, older than speech. it affects every aspect of our brains, and so yes, I mean, even in the civil rights movement, not even, but in the civil rights movement, we saw the power of the song "We Shall Overcome." My sister was in jail in Mississippi at the time, and with some others, and they sang in jail. That's what kept them unified, kept them together. Yeah, we need music. It's fantastic. And I think, I hope that the 2 songs that I put on YouTube, they're at, actually it's Shea, S-H-E-A, Foot. I use Foot, it's kind of my tribal name. Shea Foot Music, on YouTube. I hope that in addition they're entertaining. I think the second one, Rise America Rise, is really a hoot, because we had this incredibly talented music video creator, producer that I may have even used AI to animate the heads on Mount Rushmore of the presidents so that they're singing. I mean, he even got the eyelids, blinking and everything. And it's so we can have fun too. So I hope that my prayer is that the songs will somehow heal and give us courage.
Yeah, and that I think is healing and courage, and because there's so much negativity in the air, and I think some of that negativity is intentionally driven because it gives a few people power. If you can get people mad and angry, you can pull their strings and make them do all sorts of weird things that go against their interest, like cut off health care.
And despair paralyzes us. I want to point out make sure people know that the voice of the Statue of Liberty in Rise America Rise is not my voice. It's a very beautiful voice of Rada Navalnyak, who we will always tease now is the voice of the Statue of Liberty.
We're going to go on, and we want to make sure we have time to say this, but so we want to make sure we have a good time to listen to your song as we leave the show. We're listening to Food Freedom Radio. Anything else you want to say as we're playing the song out, Shea?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to air the songs, and I hope that people will pass them around, because that's the idea, is to try to that they would help people. It's just pure and simple.
Pure and simple, and that coming from that core, and the music speaks to the soul and how we come together. I would love to have elections be about policy, because I think we would really come up with the best solutions, especially with this food system. Instead of just I'm working at McDonald's today, and how do we move into that? How do we honor our ancestors and build the democracy our children deserve and we deserve today? Get out and vote, and let's leave let's operate from that place and rise.
Tyranny disguises as lies and fear and hate. We are woke, throw off their yoke. I swear it's not too late.
Not too late. Rise. Look for the music on YouTube. That's Shea Foot Music on YouTube. Shea, S-H-E-A, Foot, F-O-O-T-E, Music.